Well, well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. We're starting pretty much on time, which is a rarity for Zoom these days, I feel like. And I'm so excited to be able to chat with everyone and have Shannon and Arum join us in a topic called Love in the Time of Corona, which, is a little bit different than the webinars we typically host. I am the New York City chapter lead of WAFFA, and before we begin, there's a bit of housekeeping just to sort of lay down the ground rules. The format for today is going to be 40 minutes of conversation, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. And so, if you have any questions, you have comments, feel free to, submit in the below. I think there is a chat box, and then, we could, sort of pepper it in through the conversation to make it a fun discussion, or we could leave it towards the end, depending on how the conversation today goes. We do want to make it interactive. So, if at any point you have something to chime in, just again, write it in the chat box below. Another thing is this meeting is being recorded. So if you don't want your face shown, feel free to mute yourself or to hide your video, and we will distribute the video afterwards. So with that said, I'll hand it off to Shannon and to Arum and to kick it off.
Great, amazing. And as I'm doing this, I'm clicking ferociously here. There's all these people that are waiting to get in. So we're up to
Oh, so I guess you have to let them all individually?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So now I think actually we're good now, but just a heads up, Vivian.
Yeah.
So here we go. So thank you. First and foremost, welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Arum, for joining us today. This is our new series called Quarantalks, and we're just here adjusting with the current landscape and environment. And it's sponsored by this group called WAFFA, which is the Wharton Alumni Founders and Funders Association. We are really a bunch of founders and funders that are on a mission to help change the narrative, to help get more female founders funded, to get more women into investment-making decision roles. Thank you, Arum. And it was really started in response to this stat that right now we have, like many business schools, 13% of Penn's founders are women, and about 6% of them have received venture dollars. And we just think, we can do better. And that's why we exist. And so we're here today to tell stories like Arum's that just are here to celebrate the founder and let folks know, really get a sense of how you did this. And with regards to today, we'd really love to hear what you're seeing about love in the time of coronavirus. I mean, I'll just let you take it away with that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Shanna. I'm so happy to be here, and also, I haven't done an event with Wharton alum for a while now, so I'm very excited.
Oh, we're so happy.
Yeah, just hopefully everybody knows who I am, but just as a quick intro, my name is Arum. I'm a Wharton alum.
Actually, can I do a quick, can I just mention, because you do have a fascinating background, can I just do a quick high-level overview for those?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
No one ever does their own bio justice. So Arum founded this company with a background in product. Was it Amazon? Was it Avon before this? Came up with the idea for Coffee Meets Bagel at HBS. I mean, we won't hold that against you, but she did go to Wharton undergrad. And so she came up with this idea while at HBS, launched it with this idea of finding more meaningful connections, having less be more, and especially and looking at how people can connect in that way. And so you're a little over 20 million in funding in total, Series B, and as of May of 2018. I'm a small investor in that, I should probably disclose that, but would love, and it just, you turned down money from, oh my God, what is his name?
Mark Cuban.
Thank you, from Mark Cuban, famously. And you're here today, and we just love to hear what you're seeing with this.
Yeah.
How your structure and strategy frames your current strategy.
Yeah, and so thank you for that really great intro, Shannon. Yeah, so Coffee Meets Bagel, we're a mobile dating service, and our vision and mission really is to create real connections that inspire personal growth. And it's kind of interesting, I get asked a lot, hey, what does personal growth have to do with being a dating app or singles? It's really because when you look at our core audience, for them, this self-actualization is incredibly important. Of course, it's important for a lot of, most of us humans, but for our particular core audience who really love Coffee Meets Bagel, this is really important. And really the underlying motivation for wanting to find a partner is to find somebody who can really inspire them, who can really help them through this journey of them continuing to grow and, making progress in life is really important. And we believe that the best way we can support our users in that journey is by creating these real connections that can touch you and move you. They can really help you learn something more about yourself and the world. So that's what we do. We feel obviously really passionate about it. Now, Shannon asked me, to sort of generally talk about, hey, what are the changes that we're seeing? Of course, we're seeing a lot of changes because our whole ultimate objective of existence was to enable in-person connections, meetups. And when
part of your last financing was based, the strategy was based on how to make digital connections, but then figure out ways to connect in the analog too. And so
absolutely. So when that's practically just not possible, we saw a lot of meaningful changes. So certainly we saw a lot of user behavior changes and also, how that impacts our business as well. And so, for example, I think, and this, I think, trend is not just applicable to the dating industry, but sort of wider application. Certainly one thing we're seeing is people adopting technology that they've sort of resisted in the past, and then now they're being forced to use. So for us, number one, that's, virtual date, right? And something like video technology that's been around for a long time, but the adoption was very low in general. I think people still
Why do you think that was? Why were people slow to adopt that?
I think this really in particular was more for women. I think there was still a lot of anxiety around putting yourself in front of a video and potentially, not looking good or not knowing how to present yourself, etc.
Literally, when I talk to my mother, I still see her forehead half the time, in the conversation. So I feel this, and my sisters and I try to teach her, this is how you hold a phone, mom, and but it still doesn't resonate.
Yeah, and it takes some skill to.
Yeah, it does.
You want to make a great first impression, right? And so I think that's why people still felt a lot more comfortable with photos and in-person meetup, but video adoption has really been pretty low. And so now they're being forced to actually use it. And we've been sort of interviewing and surveying our customers pretty much weekly since the shelter-in-place lockdown started. And we're seeing significantly more users, wanting to use video, being more open to using video. And what was really interesting for me was people who have actually used it, vast majority said they really enjoyed it and that they will continue to use it post-pandemic. So I think there's definitely a permanent behavior shift in our users for sure.
And so what did you see even with in terms of, when we spoke before, even before this became, an idea around oh, other people might like this too, was this idea of what you said that a few weeks ago, that user numbers across industries, engagement was way up. And so do you think that, and usership was about the same or hadn't really changed, but in terms
of so across the industry, what we're seeing is the new user taking interest in trying online dating has actually declined initially. Now, my guess is as this sort of lockdown continues, that's going to change. But, I think naturally, if you are thinking, hey, the whole point of using dating service is to meet somebody in person and I can't do that, I'm not going to try it. So I think that's understandable. Now, people who are already on it and using it, we're seeing definitely heightened engagement because, they have, whether it's because they have less things to do or that's really the only connection they can actually have right now. So we're definitely seeing some increase in engagement.
Okay.
For us though, we've sort of taken a number of things to change within our company with the COVID when it really hit the US. So there were mainly 4 focus areas that we wanted to make sure we cover as a strategy strategy change in response to COVID-19. And one of them was product strategy.
Okay.
And so if we are really, if we really put ourselves in our user shoes, okay, now they cannot meet pretty much anyone, and they can't go to bars, they can't go have dinners, etc. What do they, what do they really need? And if, putting ourselves in their shoes and also talking to them, we felt like what was really needed was sort of synchronous connections. So a lot of online dating, online portion is done asynchronously, right? And the synchronous part happens in in-person meetup, because that's really gone. So how do we actually bring the synchronous aspect into online dating? And that's, the video is one of them. And our response to that is creating these meetup groups online that they can participate and connect with other singles in their area. And so we launched this initiative called Coffee Talks in 5 cities. And now we are having a lot of them throughout the week, and that allowing really thousands of our bagelers to meet others right out of their couch, and just talking about their life or whatever it is, but really giving people opportunity to still connect with new people, new singles. And of course, if there's anybody who sparks interest, they can actually connect. And so that's been really received very positively by our customers. And we're going to continue to think about how we can actually support sort of this pent-up hunger they have in terms of, craving human
connection. You have a very captive audience right now, that's for sure. Very, very captive audience.
Yeah. So that's like one example of how we changed our product strategy.
Okay. And then how are you thinking about, like, I mean, can you share a couple, or 1 or 2 stories on like how people are actually like connecting, like through, like, as you change, like roll out these new products like video chats, as a way to find these meaningful connections? Like what are you seeing there?
Yeah, actually it's really interesting, because there's a lot of definitely a lot of questions around, like, okay, what does virtual dating, like, what's the practice, like, what are we supposed to be doing? So even like one of my employees, he one day was talking about, okay, I just had a video date with somebody. That's like, I guess my first date. And like, what happens next? What's the next thing? What's my date number 2?
I walked in my kitchen.
and also there's this fear too, because virtual date wasn't something widely adopted. People are also hesitant about asking, like, oh, I don't want to be asking because it may make me look weird, etc. So what we are definitely seeing is interest, but also a lot of doubts and questions. So our job here is to really clarify this, right? So we've been producing a lot of content around the ideas around virtual dating, also really actively encouraging our users, hey, that it's okay to ask if they want to do video chat, etc. Like, the vast majority of our users are open to that, and really giving them very concrete tips, whether it's through content or features, to allow that. And there's so many, and our users have now come up with so many creative ways to virtual date, like show and tell. They cook together. They're doing the recipe swap, and it's not just a video date, because that can also create fatigue, if you do it, too much, right? And they've also been, I've also been seeing some of our users doing, social distance dating, where they meet up and they go for a walk, but they're like 6 feet apart.
And how does that, how does that work? Like, what do you, so you've been putting together all these best practices, and like, can you just share a couple of those too? Like, what do best practices look like around, like, these are some ways to socialize, like, that, like, adhere to social distancing guidelines? Like, what?
Yeah. I mean, definitely we've been encouraging people to not stop, because there's definitely a lot of things that they can still do, and actively encouraging them to do virtual activities like video date, recipe swap. I mean, online museum tour, we've heard like that also being like really cool and interesting things to do. And then, whatever they do, if they decide, hey, actually we want to take it further and meeting in person, definitely making sure that they respect and practice social distancing. But
Okay.
it's hard. It's hard in this time because, you know, at some point you really, really do want to, um, you know, you really want to be sort of experience physical closeness. So it is very hard time for, I think, singles, especially.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Sorry, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just okay. I just left the last of the folks in here. I don't know if Vivian is. Vivian, can you let?
I'm not seeing these people actually. I don't know why. It seems
Oh,
like everyone's admitted, yeah.
okay.
Arum, I actually have a question. I know you guys have a lot of data out there, especially now when it comes to dating. Are you seeing any sort of differences between the behavior of men versus women on Coffee Meets Bagel?
Because of COVID,
Yeah.
just in general.
I guess in general and now because of COVID, the before and after.
Yeah, in general, there is a big difference. Which is why when we plan our product features, etc., we always look at things from woman and men's perspective differently, because
Right.
they respond and look for very, very different things. And you know, even as just you know, things like their propensity to like, men just generally has to have tends to have like much higher volume. Woman tends to want to keep the volume low. They tend to be a lot more picky, and they can be picky, right? Because they also tend to get liked a lot more than men. And so when you sort of think about it, men are a lot of times they're thinking about how do I stand out because I need to stand out. Women are thinking more about, okay, how do I actually decipher which of these people are really worth my time, because that's very important to them. So from that aspect, I think the behavior, a lot of, you can only imagine like how many, there's a lot of behavior differences. We haven't really seen a ton of gender difference due to COVID. So generally the trends that we're seeing is, I don't think it's gender specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
And even on the so I actually this morning I was scrolling through Instagram and I read a post that read, and it just said here, it said social distancing means we can embrace slow dating, less rushing,
yeah.
and more time revealing what we want from a match and getting to know each other. Can you just talk to me? I think that's actually I mean, for people that are forced to be at home, I mean, we're like really forced to, you know, just figure out how to connect like virtually like this with people.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is really interesting trend that we're seeing. So just in general, one of the trends that we are seeing is very heightened interest in wellness, personal care, personal wellness, and mental health.
Yeah.
And just online education too, right? And really learning more about, hey, like, how do I deal with this anxiety and overwhelming, you know, uncertainty around the future, etc. Even our employees too. So this is one of the reasons, you know, what I mentioned, the 4 areas that we have been focusing on. Number 1 was really how do we protect our employees? And one of the things we did was coming up with resilience program, because this whole experience can be really overwhelming. But going back to sort of your point about slow dating, I almost think one of the gifts of this pandemic is that now we have more time and to really be more introspective, you know, sort of thinking about like what's really important for me. We're not like rushed with all these things that we have to do all the time, filling our time schedule with a lot of activities, etc. So we're almost forced to sort of take the time to do that. I think that's really great for singles, because I think it really allows them to have more confidence around what's really important to them and therefore who I want to have as a partner. And then you can actually make better decisions as opposed to, I'm going to just, you know, swipe or whatever, find as many people as I can and occupy my time and see who I am interested in. You can sort of take a more deliberate path, which is something we've always been, you know, that's what we've
that's always been a core focus. And it hasn't really changed in your strategy then at all. It's really just highlighted it more.
Yeah, and I think it's because of this timing, I think it's really highlighting, you know, like you said, really more the importance of it.
Okay. Wow. So then if you could share like just one or like a story around like, have you heard a great dating story come out of this? And like, I'm sure that we have a number of folks that I do want to, I would actually love to open it up. We keep having more and more people come onto this. So I would love, I think we have a lot of people, oh my God, I'm letting even more now. Okay, wow, okay. This is great. I'm gonna open up to the group for more questions, because I think that's where people will find the most value, because I know that there's a lot of people that even emailed us before that wanted to ask questions directly to you. But just, is there like one or two stories of folks that that you've seen where like they're like just like a great dating story that you've heard of that you'd like to share?
Yeah, we actually have it. And I kind of want to link this, since there's a lot of founders, I'm guessing, link this to also how this relates to how we've been responding as a business to COVID. When something like this hits, it's totally unexpected. You don't have a lot of time to prepare or think or strategize, etc. And so what this in a way really enabled us to do is just focus on, okay, immediately, what do our customers need the most? What can we do for our customers? And, you know, let's not do the ROI calculation and all that stuff. Like, let's leave that for aside, which we would normally have done. Really just focus on what can we do immediately for customers where that we can add value to them in this situation. And in a way, finally, I think that really allowed us to not only move fast, but just listen to our intuition more.
Yeah.
And that's really how the coffee talk came out as well. But also linking to the story, one thing we sort of thought about immediately was, oh my God, there are so many couples whose weddings are being canceled because of COVID. What can we do for our, especially our Coffee Meets Bagel couples who, you know, obviously so much goes into wedding planning and all that stuff, who's, you know, maybe heartbroken because their wedding got canceled. And so we actually got to know this couple who, you know, through, you know, some various connections, whose wedding got canceled, but they, so the friend of them actually organized a virtual surprise wedding where we actually crashed
Oh my God, I love it.
as a guest. And then we actually partnered with Getaway to offer this couple a weekend out, even though they cannot have a wedding. You know, I think Getaway actually is doing a number of things to make sure that people can still go, you know, have like weekend getaways. And so give them a weekend away. So we were able to actually award this. And now we're actually doing this to a wider group and looking for 10 CMB couples whose wedding got canceled, so we can actually offer this. And so that's, which is fantastic. We're very excited about it. But this sort of linking back to how quickly we had to react, and when you really focus your sort of creativity into what value we can create for customers, I think a lot of great things can happen.
You're right. And just having that focus, I think is, I mean, I think if there's anything to come out of this too, it's that it all of a sudden became very clear on like, okay, what's important.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just, when you have that focus, it becomes that much clearer.
Yeah, and sometimes we overthink, right? We think about, okay, is this scalable? Is this, you know, is this, what's the return going to be? And those are all obviously really important, but sometimes that can really get in the way too.
True, very true.
Arum, I know you briefly mentioned this, you know, obviously as a founder, I'm a founder myself as well. I'd love to hear some of the initiatives that, you know, you've done to help your employees as well as the company to cope with the situation, but also to stay course. How are you sort of prioritizing the different things to take, especially when it comes to, you know, customer satisfaction and employee happiness? Yeah,
and so immediately as we were seeing impact of COVID-19, and we really started seeing it when the shelter in place came in order, we got together as an executive team and sort of narrowed down our focus in 4 areas. So one was protecting our employees. Number 2 was really stress testing our P&L. So what's our exposure? Number 3 was re-looking at our product roadmap. And, you know, of course, there are defensive acts that we have to do. So for example, any references we were making to encourage in-person meetup, like obviously we have to change that. So there are those basic things we have to do. But I absolutely believe in a situation like this, there's opportunities. So what can we do to play offense? So those are two questions we asked ourselves. And the number 4 was, basically conserving cash. So really preparing for potentially sustained lockdown. And what we started doing was, every executive meeting, of course, we talk about these 4 areas, and we've always done weekly all hands, but this is now the first thing that we cover, update weekly on these 4 areas. What are we doing? And we've always been very transparent, but there's definitely, because of anxiety, uncertainty with future, our employees really want to know, okay, like how are we doing, etc., right? Impact on the business. So we've been very proactive about that, and also communicating that very proactively to investors too. That's really important, because there's a lot of chaos. They're also getting asked from their LPs, like, hey, what's happening with your portfolio companies, etc. And particularly, I think for our employees, we've always been very, I'm proud to say, we've always worked hard to create an environment where we can enable our employees to create the work environment that they want, basically. And some people, that means like, I want to work at the office, but some people that means I want to work from home or some other, I don't know, random places. And our belief is, hey, if we do a really good, like the kind of workplace we want to create is where our employees have freedom to create the kind of environment that they can be most productive. And so with that, we were always very work from home friendly. And so our transition into everyone working from home was super smooth, like very uneventful. I think it was somewhat business as usual. And in addition to that, I sort of mentioned at the beginning of the call, we came up with resilience program working with our leadership coach. So every week we've been, she's been doing virtual session with our employees on, dealing with, anything from, negative mindset all the way to, how do you actually help others who may be in a more, challenging situation, things like that. Yeah. And then, it's really all about also creating these other opportunities for employees to continue to connect with each other. We do 3 times a week virtual hangouts, totally optional. And now we're seeing a lot of our employees just taking initiatives to do that. So for example, I saw one employee now they're doing like weekly photo challenge on a particular topic where you can like share something, reveal something more about yourself in an interesting way. So yeah, those are some number of things that we've done for our employees.
Awesome. And then as we, one more question before we start to open this up to the group, what do you think, do you have any predictions just on what a post, COVID, as we start to have this conversation and re-enter society as we know it, obviously with very different parameters, but as we, still start to re-enter society nonetheless, what do you think we'll see in dating? Do you have any predictions?
Yes, I do have my opinions. Yeah, and
and clearly caveating with no one knows anything anymore. Everything is clearly changing daily.
So yeah, it's changing a lot by the day. But what we do think is that we think the sort of going back to normal will be a very gradual process. It's not going to be a step function okay, shelter in place is out, everybody get back. Because, for example, I saw Starbucks business in China, even though after they reopened, they have not gone back to their, business as usual metrics. And they're seeing still impact, and this is going to be a gradual return. People are still hesitant about going about and doing the things that they used to do. And so absolutely in the dating sense, when you think about it, large gatherings certainly wouldn't be I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But even things like hanging out at a bar, going to a house party or whatever, where you used to meet these people, new people, it's just not going to happen. And so I think this is where product innovation can really take place. What is going to replace that, right?
Exactly. No, I think there's a massive opportunity right there.
Mm-hmm.
And to do it in a way that, like, yeah, circling back to what we were originally talking about, like, this is an like, I can't wait to see what happens with like AR and VR in this space. We were eventually going to get so sick of Zoom that like, okay, like really, what's next? Good. Well, Vivian, do you want to do quick fire questions as well?
Yeah.
Do you want to
so Arum, we're really excited to be trying this with you. You're the first speaker that we have that we're trying this with. But it's a quick fire segment where we have a couple of questions, actually I think 8 questions, and it's just, rapid responses, whatever comes to your mind first. Probably about 1 minute or so each. So the first question is, what's your favorite book and why?
My favorite book, I read a lot of self-help books. My favorite book is New Earth. It's called New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if anyone has read it.
It's a good one. I'm actually rereading A Whole New Mind again.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, The Power of Now. The Power of Now.
Power of Now, yeah. And it's important to me. It's my favorite, one of my favorites, because it was somewhat of a beginning of my journey to understanding what it takes to be happy. And it's still a journey, but it somewhat opened up a new chapter for me. So I think that's why it's my favorite.
Awesome. So the next one is, what is something that will change the world in the next 5 years in 10 words or less?
Oh yeah, 10 words.
Give or take.
Yeah, I really think it's the mindfulness movement. And I really can't explain this in 10 words or less.
Yeah.
But I think
movement is, that's 10 words or less.
That's,
okay, mindfulness that works. Yes,
what quote do you mostly frequently revert back to and why?
Oh yeah, so this one, we must become the change we want to see, is something I keep coming back to. And as a leader, that's from Gandhi. And I think as a leader, it's a really important quote.
It's awesome.
Great one.
What do you consider the most overrated virtue?
Yeah. So this.
Proust on you. Sorry.
Yeah, this one was. So I pick tenacity or grit. Oh, grit. Yeah, I think that's a pretty better word, not because it's not important or anything, but I think it's the way that's being interpreted. I think is not in its best light. So I think a lot of people actually interpret this to mean that, you need to struggle in order to be successful. And I absolutely don't think that's the case. So I would pick that. Awesome.
So when I say success, who is the first person who comes to mind and why?
Oh, my dad, because he had to reinvent himself so many times. And even in his, 70s right now, he's still doing that. It's amazing.
That's awesome. What would you most like to change about Silicon Valley and tech today?
So I guess going back to being the change that you want to see, I guess this is something I also tell myself a lot. And I don't think this is particular to Silicon Valley, but I see it a lot here because I think there's a lot of pressure. But I really want to see a change where people just have the freedom to chart their own path and not feel like you have to do things certain way, this way, you have to raise money from VC, you have to like do the ABC because that's the success, formula, which I actually used to think a lot in that terms too, because I was just told that, which absolutely is not, not the case. I think when you have this, I really want to see more people feeling empowered to create and achieve things the way they want to.
And that's in every aspect of their lives, I'm guessing? Or
Absolutely every aspect of their life. There's a lot of shoulds and whatever they think is the way it's supposed to happen. And, that's just simply not the case. I think in a way, a lot of us limit ourselves because of that.
That's interesting.
So cool.
And lastly, of the rapid fire, what does the next 5 years hold for you and Coffee Meets Bagel?
Oh, well, there's a lot to be done. Okay, so in a minute, I think when I look at singles today, there's still so much hopelessness and feeling of frustration. And, next 5 years, we want to devote ourselves to changing that narrative. We want to decode and make it so clear to the users on what it takes to find the love of your life and have an awesome relationship so that they feel empowered. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, it's an easy path, but at least they feel empowered and clear about what they need to do. And that's what we're going to devote our time on.
It's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is awesome. And here's the divine algorithms and people coming together and finding new meaningful ways to connect. We'd love to open up now to the audience for audience Q&A. If you just want to type in questions into the chat box, or wait, Vivian, is that how folks are doing it?
Yeah, but we can also, because this is a meeting, so we set it up as a meeting versus a webinar. You can also, if you want to, you can unmute yourself and you can ask Arum a question directly.
Great. Cara, I know you had a question. Do you want to go first?
Yes, sorry, I was just unmuting myself.
You too.
So I am very curious. I'm married and have been with my partner for over a decade, so I'm super boring, but I'm very curious how people who are going on Zoom dates, are getting to the point where they're ending them. I feel like ending a Zoom meeting in a professional setting is awkward enough. How do you end a Zoom date? And how do you potentially end like a second Zoom date? I just am so curious about how that is all going down.
That's a really good question, and not even on Zoom, right? If this is even phone call or even meeting, it's very there's a lot of jokes around like, okay, how do I find an exit, way, or like my friend like telling them to like call me at this time or whatever. So we actually think there is benefit to so even when thinking about like video calls or even coffee talk, like already upfront setting the expectation, this is going to be an hour, and so you already have a sort of natural way of leaving when you even before the beginning of the whatever you're doing. I think that's sort of the
long time, right? An hour is a really long time.
Well, our coffee talks are an hour because there's a lot of people. Yeah.
Right, because you're meeting multiple people. But to talk to someone, like just like hop on a call with someone for an hour would be a long time.
Yeah, that would be a long time. So even when you suggest like, hey, do you wanna do 20-minute FaceTime? Like just even setting that very upfront is always easier and less awkward. The other thing is when you do more of a second date, we encourage you to be more activity based. So like if you're cooking or I don't know, if you're doing we kind of encourage like Netflix viewing too. There is natural end to it if it's like activity based. So we think those are some great ideas to less awkwardly end your virtual dates.
Great, thank you.
There was another question on the chat.
Yeah, so what differences do you see in customer behavior under COVID situation across different geographies? Oh, yeah. Are you seeing anything there actually? That's a great question. Thanks.
But definitely we are seeing our businesses being impacted differently based on geography and how widespread the pandemic is or how severe the lockdown is. It's very interesting. So even in the US, the cities where lockdown is more stringent, we're seeing more heightened, increase in engagement, lower new user signups. What I thought was really interesting was in our Asian markets, and this is very reflective of, I think, how countries are dealing with the pandemic. we saw initially when the pandemic, and that happened a little bit earlier in, a lot of Asian cities, hit, we saw very same exact, new user sort of softening and then engagement going up, but then it very quickly went back to sort of business as usual. And I think that's sort of testament to some of these markets who really were able to deal with this pandemic in a very effective manner.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, we're not seeing that. We're seeing very gradual, continual, and sustained impact. So those are some interesting observations that we've made.
And do you think that just because the US was later to respond than like, a lot of Asian counterparts?
I think so. I think that's my guess. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Julie here. Can you see it too? How are customers handling privacy in this new video world? You can actually meet pretty anonymously for coffee, but cell phones or Zoom accounts have bigger digital footprints. Oh, really good question.
Yeah. And so I think, at least for us, like all the safety tips that we advise for our customers still hold, right? We definitely encourage you to not share personally identifiable information up front. And I think even on Zoom, like if you actually don't necessarily sign in with your name, etc., you can do it relatively anonymously too. In fact, with the security sort of, concerns that came out of Zoom, like we've been encouraging people like, okay, you can actually use it without downloading Zoom and having to create an account, etc. And so I think all the sort of common sense safety concerns and practices still hold, absolutely.
Okay.
There was another question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a librarian turned dating coach, so everything I use is like research based, but there's no like research on COVID for dating. I found a lot of women reluctant to join because they think if you're on video, you're like a cam girl and guys are only interested in one thing for video. Have you found that that's the case?
So I think that's what's really interesting. I think used to be the perception is that, and with this, I almost think it frees people up from those concerns because now you have to. There's no other way. And so people who, whatever reason, whether it's this reason or whatever else, have been resisting, I think is now there's a lot more, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it in our numbers and our user behavior. They're a lot more open to trying it. And once they do it, I think that's here to stay. But it's also really good to know that you're a dating coach.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love your format because it helps people slowly date.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, one question from Lila here was, with the lockdowns continuing to extend, how do you envision relationships unfolding? How many virtually socially distanced dates can one have without feeling like you're stagnating?
Yeah. So we are definitely hearing this too. We're definitely hearing this too, like fatigueness coming in. Because you can have only so many virtual dates and so many social distancing activities. Yeah, and so I honestly don't have the answer to it. I think it's really ultimately, I think what I've been telling even my personal friends who actually are going through this is personal risk assessment, right? And if you feel very confident that you're not having any other social interaction with others, like you're not meeting your friends, etc. I mean, obviously you're not supposed to, but people use sort of their own judgment, and you feel very confident that that other person has been doing that too. I mean, I think it's really up to your personal choice to decide, okay, I have enough confidence in, their condition, my condition, to be able to actually meet and interact and do it in a way that doesn't impose risk to others in my network. I think that certainly comes down to personal choices.
And do you think, like, along those lines, like, one of the conversations that I keep having with friends is like this whole immunity conversation around like people eventually who do have like, can like get tested for this and have immunity, and almost creating like two different classes of people. Like, do you think that, like, how would that impact like how we even think about dating and who you can eventually see like in the analog.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about this. Is this going to be like the sort of do you sort of filtering question that you need to ask?
Like you put that on your account that says like, no, that's like exactly what we can't. This is when it gets really Orwellian.
But to be honest, I think what we said is, yes, it's going to seem, that may really be the case. And, it's going to seem so awkward. Nobody's going to want to do that. It may initially be that, but how I see it is like this desire for human connection is such a powerful driver, and we all need it. That yes, it may seem awkward at the beginning, but that very quickly I think will be the new norm. If people need to do that, they'll do that, and still gonna continue to meet up.
Yeah, after we figure out the tests actually are effective too.
Yes.
A question here we have. Wait, this just popped up. Has Coffee Meets Bagel considered implementing new product features to cope with COVID-19? If so, could you share more about the new product idea dating innovation? I think you've talked about that.
Yeah, so without repeating too much, I think, the coffee talk was how, like, sort of our response to COVID-19 in terms of features. And I think definitely there's going to be more opportunities to innovate in terms of how we can actually create these sort of synchronous opportunities for people to mingle.
Awesome. Okay. And then do you think the post-COVID era, we will have to have individuals get tested before meeting up for a date?
My guess is once the vaccine is out, we probably won't need to do everybody. It'll just be like a flu vaccine, but I guess it's more probably will be a requirement. I think if we need to sort of maybe heighten the bar so that like everybody really gets it. But once that becomes a norm, I'm not sure if individual testing will still be a necessary step before meeting for a date.
Could you imagine? It's a lot of extra steps. And okay, do we have any more from Ben? Does anyone else have any other? Come on, guys, don't be shy. This is everyone. I was like getting inundated with questions before this. Where did they all? How does it? Wait, here's one. How does it feel? How does it feel founding and running the company with your sister? Any advice? Advice for similar founders, teams of best friends?
Yeah, it's really amazing when you can make it work. But it takes a lot of work to really make it work. And so at the very beginning, we had a lot of friction, and we deliberately put in effort to structure our roles and responsibilities so that we're not stepping on each other's toes, and also the way we communicate to each other in front of others, our employees, etc. We had to get a lot of coaching. So we actually worked quite a long time with leadership coaches that really specialize in family businesses and this this I think comes all in the realm of as you grow as a leader, becoming a lot more self-aware of yourself and also aware of implications of your actions and words on others. So as you sort of develop that, I think our dynamic, as we became better at those and investing in those, our dynamic became a lot better. And it's amazing. I think it helped us a lot, especially at the beginning, because when you're having to move a lot, like very fast in a time of where there's a lot of uncertainty, working with somebody who you can really trust takes away need to do a lot of extra things, like we didn't have to, codify, document everything, or like go through, rely on legal to do all kinds of stuff, because we just inherently trusted a lot in each other. So that's really a powerful thing. But make sure you invest in those relationships and, ability to cultivate great working dynamic with each other. I think it really requires time and effort to get better at. Yeah.
And did you, like, what kind of thing, since I wasn't even aware that, like, your dad being one of your biggest mentors, like, what did he, I mean, did he have any influence in, like, helping the three
Oh,
of you?
absolutely, absolutely. So what's funny is my dad also started a company with his brother. So already there, is a big influence. So he actually started his company, I mean, I don't know, 30 years ago. It's in scrap metal business, recycling metal business, completely different. But when I see people, especially in the Valley, talking about I want to, like, I don't know, flip this company in 5 years or 3 years, whatever. And then seeing just my dad being so dedicated in this mission and his vision really evolving over time, this period of 30 years, and constantly really reinventing himself as a leader, I think was a big influence. And so, even at the very beginning when Down and I and Sue, we were creating this company, and now too, we really wanted to commit ourselves to working on a cause and mission that we would want to and be excited to work on for a very long time, potentially lifetime. And when I've heard this quote, that I forgot somebody, but who said it, but when it comes to entrepreneurship, or I guess generally in life, like, struggle is guaranteed, but success is not. And definitely that's the case. Like, you could make all the right choices and work hard or whatever, but ultimately success is not guaranteed. And so you really want to make sure the time that you're spending is spent on something that you really believe in. And that's what my dad really have demonstrated for us.
I love that. Well, along those lines, if you're going to be doing this for a long time, we need to make sure that you're well. And so one question from Cindy we have down here was she said, you mentioned wellness is a trend, or as a trend, and uniquely positioned to benefit from COVID. Are there any opportunities that Coffee Meets Bagel will explore in wellness?
Yeah, so I think generally this interest in wellness and the sort of hunger to learn more, I think is what sort of observation we're making. And so even in this case, I mentioned at the very beginning, for our users, personal growth is really important. So already our audience was very interested in this. And I think COVID just has really heightened it. So we see, one of the roles that we see for our users is, how can we actually guide and facilitate our singles through this journey? Because, this journey can feel very lonely and difficult. And part of that is educating them, And so now that with this sort of new heightened interest, we're actually actively thinking about, okay, in addition to our product features, doing a lot of things to educate how, what and how what action to take next, etc. Is there actually opportunity to really actively work with, whether it's dating coach or whatever, to get people more educated in this front? I think that could be interesting.
Oh, great. Okay. Interesting here. Okay. And then we have probably time for one more before we get off here. From Derek here, we have a question about, could you please talk about how you manage the natural customer attrition for people who successfully find their significant others? How do you continue engaging them going forward?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
So it's about attrition question. How do you, for people who successfully find their significant others on Coffee Meets Bagel, how do you continue to engage with them once they've coupled?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So right now, the way we engage with them, of course, these are our best ambassadors. And so we want to keep relationship with them. And so we engage them, whether it's through social media, we try to keep in touch with a lot of them. I mean, as to the best of our ability right now. I mean, at this point, there's a lot of them. So obviously can't keep up with everyone, but outside of our app right now, we definitely try to keep them engaged, mostly through social media, I would say.
Okay. And then there's one more question here about, especially given huge, like a big portion of Coffee Meets Bagel's users are in Asia. And he was saying dating works, Kunal was saying that dating works very differently in some emerging countries like China and India. Have you considered some customized features for such geographies?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, right now our focus has not been too much on markets outside of the US. And so mostly we're still focused on, what can we offer to our users here. And, there's obviously a lot of things that's transferable, right? Applicable for across the geography. I think this is definitely something, we would want to do, localizing our product. And that's a lot more than just translating, right? Once we actually want to invest more in other markets.
Okay. Well, thank you. And actually, hang on, we just have one more coming here. Can we do, if we have like 4 minutes left, I know we're like down to the wire now, but one question from Carissa is, were there any challenges you experienced, or is there anything you learned from the lens of an Asian female founder?
Yeah, so definitely a lot. And I think one, if I were to like very succinctly talk about it, is just the importance of supporting other female founders was one thing that I really learned, because there's definitely, I've kind of talked about this in other various different venues, but when you are, I think especially at an early stage company where there's a lot of intuition, sort of personal judgment going in, there's not a lot of data, etc. Our biases play such a big important role. And I'm sorry to potential investors, but I mean investors here, but as much as we think we're making rational, objective decisions, like really it isn't. There's so much subjectivity that goes into making these investment decisions, and bias plays a huge role. And that's just a fact. And so when you are a minority, whether Asian, female, or whatever else, you are at a disadvantage because you are pitching to people who have different life experiences, who have different lens that they see the world that's just totally different from how you see the world. And so you're at a disadvantage. And so really the only way we can sort of come to equity with this is having more of the other, more diversity. And this is why I think I just, absolutely loved pitching to female investors. Linnea, that's how we got introduced. Yeah. We got in touch with Shannon. And also just supporting other female founders. We need to really help each other to create a better future where there's more diversity in Silicon Valley and overall just in among the entrepreneurs and investors.
And what would you say as you think about like how female founders, because the majority of our audience here are typically are a lot of like early stage, I mean, some of which are female, like most of which are female, but like, what do you say, like with COVID as sort of like the impetus for this, what would you say to like the female founders on this, on this call today to say, or I mean, founders in general on the call, like how could you use as an opportunity to come together and like, I mean, obviously the business plays a big part in this, but just as a community, like what would you like to see?
Oh, you mean in this time, COVID time?
Yeah, like how do you think, like, have you seen anyone like come together like in response to COVID in a really compelling way to try to lift and support each other up so that, you can make it to the next round of funding or to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, this doesn't take a lot. Like supporting each other can come in so many different ways. So for example, the female founder group I'm in, when the whole, payment protection program was coming in, there was so much confusion and like just everybody scrambling for things, etc. And I saw a lot of conversations among the female founder group, really supporting each other with information. Hey, this is what I heard, blah, blah, blah. Really sharing things proactively with each other. Like that is a pretty simple example, but that's how we come together, right? And so, and this obviously doesn't just apply to female founder networks, but just any network in your community doing small things, especially in the time of uncertainty, checking in, how are you doing? Things like that makes a big difference.
Completely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on today, Arum, and for sharing this with us on Love in the Time of COVID, Love in the Time of Coronavirus. And no, thank you. This is wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and we'll send out a copy of this just in a link or via email to everyone after this. I think Vivian, Vivian, I will do that after this. And our next stop after this is actually next Tuesday, the 5th, with Andy from who founded Wealthfront, and is also a co-founder over at Benchmark. And he'll be talking a lot about robo-investing. So for everyone who came today who's interested in that topic as well, please join us. And thank you again, Arum. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right. Take care. Bye.